Okay, welcome, folks. This is Ford Fisher, and this is Magic the Grappling podcast, episode number 3. This podcast is going to be brought to you by manatraders.com and onelioncbd.com. My ManaTraders promo code is MOON, MOON, and you get 15% off for your first 3 months. So, today what I wanted to talk about was really just a profile on me, more or less, what I really should have done in the first episode, I feel like. Because nobody really knows who I am, and I wanted to talk about really just how I got started in both Magic and being a pro wrestling fan. Like a lot of kids did in the mid-90s, I collected baseball cards. And now they're worth, pretty much nothing. But actually, I don't know. Maybe right now there's actually a little bit of a resurgence in all cards. I've seen collectible cards of pro wrestling cards. And actually, I've got a friend that I can have on the podcast in the future about that, and we can talk about that. That would be something good to talk about, seeing as how the price is going up with those. But anyway, that was about 1996, and I was going to this card shop nearby my house all the time, and I'd get about $3 every week from my parents, and I would spend that $3 on a pack of baseball cards, or something specific, like one specific card that I wanted, which they didn't really have too many singles. But regardless, I went in there one day and I saw these other cards up there, and they looked like a collectible card, but it was nothing related to sports that I could decipher. And so he told me it was this game called Magic the Gathering. And he told me that there's a game that you can play with it. You can collect the cards and you can use them in a game to win. And that was something that I always wanted to do with the cards that I was collecting. Basketball, baseball. I even had a set of PGA golf cards, and I always wanted to figure out a way to play a game with them. Because otherwise you're just kind of looking at them and collecting them. And Magic was the answer to that for me. So what I did, I really just switched over to Magic almost immediately, and that was I don't know, I'd say mid third grade, fourth grade, give or take. I can't remember exactly when, but I think it was I remember the first pre-con is what we used to call them, pre-constructed decks. The first one I ever bought was from Stronghold, and it was the deck of all spikes, and it was a type of creature that you could move +1/+1 counters around with, and it was just so much fun. I really enjoyed learning how to play with that type of deck, and the game was a lot simpler then. But so was just about everything else back in the day. I mean, you look at pro wrestling back in even as early as mid '90s, like I'm talking about with Magic, and it was so different than it is today. I mean, today it is at a blistering speed and a blistering pace compared to what it was in the mid-90s. Now, you did have some ECW stuff. You had some better wrestlers like Arn Anderson that could really go and move quickly and make it believable. But for the most part, it was really slow, methodical, and really not all that great at that time, especially in America. Maybe in Japan or England and other places that it was good, Mexico. But to get back onto the Magic thing, the game was a lot simpler, but at the same time, it seemed like they wasted text. They would the cards had so many words on them to explain something that is now explained with just one word. For example, back in 96, 97, I remember specifically like the slivers, and the one that was red. I think it was called Heart Sliver, and it would give essentially all slivers haste, and what is known as haste these days. And back in those days, the card would literally say, "Da da da." This card is like Heart Sliver is unaffected by summoning sickness. And I would venture to say that a lot of players these days really don't know what summoning sickness is, and they don't really call it that too much anymore. I guess maybe they do, and I could be completely off on that, but I don't really hear it so often unless you hear it from an older player, kind of like how they call standard. If you hear an older player call standard type 2, you know just about how old they are. They're probably 35 years old or so. And then like another good example I think is some of them have come about through the community, and then they end up being printed on the card afterward. Just like the haste, fear is another one. But fear was an actual card, and I could be wrong, but I don't remember haste being an actual card in Magic, but I've been wrong before. Fear is definitely a famous one, and it gave the creature that it enchanted, an enchant creature, it gave it the ability that it couldn't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. And well, let's see what I'm trying to look up, see if there was actually a card named Haste, because I don't think there was, and I don't think there was ever anything like that. But like I'm saying, back in '96 and before, fear was read out, spelled out, in those words. It would say, this creature cannot be blocked by black except by black creatures and artifact creatures, or artifact creatures, really. And now it's fear, and they have different versions of it now. They have what was it when they were other colors where they can't be blocked? I can't remember what that was right now. Gosh, I'm running off the cuff with this right now, but I should have been looking at that. I used to have a great green creature. I guess it was Intimidate. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. It was a green creature that would it gave all of your other green creatures Intimidate, and I would use that in EDH. Because I used a mono green deck, so of course all my creatures would be unblockable unless by green creatures. And Intimidate was a little bit different than Fear, so that's why, because the artifact creature clause was, I think, taken out. So I don't know. Again, I could be wrong on all that. I didn't do all kinds of research on this. I really didn't think all that was going to come up in my ramblings. But as far as starting in Magic in '96. Man, most kids, we put, especially if you were like 10, 12 years old, like I was in '96, I was 10, and we would put just about every card we owned in our deck, and we didn't use sleeves. And, I had a stack of probably 150 cards that I would play. I don't know, maybe about 100 or so, but I remember having at least 2 copies of every Circle of Protection that was available to me at that time. They didn't have, I think they had just, no, they hadn't come out with Circle of Protection lands yet. They had all the 5 colors and Cop artifacts also, I believe. But they didn't have the Cop lands yet. I believe that was Urza Saga? Yeah, I think Urza Saga. So that was a lot of fun. And it wasn't just mono white. I mean, I think I remember having a black snake card in there called like Serpent Warrior. It was a stupid card. It was like 4 mana for a 3/3, and when it hit the field, I lose 3 life. I mean, it was... the cards are so much better these days and so much more versatile. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine last night on the phone saying that, a lot of cards these days don't even have room for the flavor text. And, back in the day we would get Savannah Lions, and Savannah Lions was literally nothing. It's just 1 white for a 2/1, and it just had a paragraph of a story on it, or, just a great flavor text on it. And I miss a lot of cards, having that. And it could be anywhere from a paragraph, being a vanilla card, or being something as good as like Werebear, the original Werebear from Odyssey. It says the bear, he exercises his right to bear arms. I mean, come on, that's one of the funniest play on words you could ever do. So that's just, I've always had a fascination with words and grammar and diction, and just the way, the delivery, the way things are said, and the tone, the cadence. And so I've always been drawn to Magic the Gathering, partly because of the words that they use, and I've expanded my vocabulary because of it. It's just great. I not too many 10-year-olds know the words wretched and congregate, and let's see, like Leviathan. I mean, not too many people know what Leviathan means when they're 10 years old, unless they're doing something like Dungeons and Dragons, or some sort of superhero type show or something like that. It's just, and like words like disintegrate. I mean, not too many 10-year-olds know what that means, and I did, because the art was always coinciding with the wording really well, and it explained it real well. Like the word, like the card congregate, just shows a bunch of angels coming together, and the card, what it does, helps explain it too. You gain 2 life for each creature you control. So the gathering of your creatures, and that's what congregate means, just a gathering of things, of people. And that's just, I love how simple Magic is in that regard. Now, I'm a little all over the place here. I've got a little bit of an outline of what I wanted to talk about here. And, it's like the wording here. I wanted to talk about, read some cards from the olden days, and just how funny they are worded, and how confusing they were, back in the day. I mean, like here, Animate Dead. Animate Dead's an old card, from Alpha Beta, 3rd, 4th, all the revised, like all the different sets, a lot of the core original sets. It's a black and 1, and essentially it just says you get to enchant a creature from a graveyard and bring it back into play, and it gets -1, -0. Boom. That's all you need to know. And and basically, and if Animate Dead dies, if it is disenchanted or for some reason, then of course that creature that is enchanting is gone as well. So this is what the card actually said. Any creature in any graveyard comes into play on your side with -1 to its original power. At end of game, or if this enchantment is discarded without removing target creature from play, target creature is returned to its owner's graveyard. Target creature may be killed as normal. I mean, that's just ridiculous. How much wording is really necessary on some of these older cards? But, at the same time, you're learning different things, like, I didn't know what kind of creature or what type of being Mephistopheles was, or Nebuchadnezzar, or, and those were some cards of real mythology. And there were several of those in Magic in the olden days. Like here, there's Chains of Mephistopheles, and you get to see a great illustration of what it is. But the card is so incredibly confusing. It says, if a player would draw a card except the first one he or she draws in his or her draw step each turn, that player discards a card instead. If the player discards a card this way, he or she draws a card. If the player doesn't discard a card this way, he or she puts the top card of his or her library into their graveyard. I mean, that just... And I think that's even the updated version of it. I couldn't find a great version of the older Chains of Mephistopheles. If you can find that and look it up, it's from Legends, I believe. And I just couldn't find a good image of it where I could read it all. I mean, it is so tiny, and it's so much more writing. And, like things like Black Lotus, one of the, just probably bar none, the most famous card of all of Magic, and of course the most valuable. And you look at it, it costs 0, and it's an artifact, and basically it just says you sacrifice it and you get 3 mana of any color. Now here's what the original version of it says. Adds 3 mana of any single color of your choice to your mana pool, then is discarded. Tapping this artifact can be played as an interrupt. It just... Of course it can, but, I guess that wasn't really... It's taken for granted these days, and that wasn't really taken for granted back then. It was a brand new game. So I guess that's where the discrepancy is, and where I'm not really quite understanding it, because I didn't play in the very beginning of the game. I came in probably about 4 years into the game, 3 or 4 years into the game. I think it was 93 when it started, right? So yeah, I didn't play until, a good 3 years in, and they didn't even really have organized tournaments when I started playing. I was playing at Books A Million, and there was just a local guy that would set it up. He was in his 20s or something like that, and I remember I think I won a Birds of Paradise 2 weeks in a row. That was pretty cool. I think I got like 4th place in the tournament, and I was real excited about that, because like back then I had like an elf deck, and I think one of the best cards I had back then was Elvish Archers. I had a set of those, and that was a rare back then. A 1 for a 2/1 first strike. Come on, what is that? So Magic has really changed a lot overall, but it has taught me a lot. So I have to give credit to them in that regard. As far as wrestling goes, I have learned some words, and I like the way they put things, the commentators especially, because you hear them the most. Someone you're going to hear the most is going to make the most mistakes, of course, because that's the one that's talking the most. and the ones that I would expect to have the best grammar and diction would be the commentators, because they're trained journalists for the most part, especially the play-by-play people. The wrestlers that are color commentators, I'm not so much worried about them, but I hate to get on them because it's something that I've always wanted to be, was a pro wrestling commentator, and I got to be one shortly in a small company in South Carolina, and that was so much fun. I really enjoyed it, but it's just something that has always stuck out to me with pro wrestling, is just sometimes how awful grammar they have. And, I'm not saying I have perfect grammar by any means, and, I always lament over the words that I'm using and anything I write, and I don't want to, like anything on social media or anything, I always go over it, several times, and I'm trying not to use the same word more than once, just because I just try not to do that. But with pro wrestling commentators, the thing that sticks out to me most, and they did it several times during the most recent pay-per-view, TLC, was when they say something like, he doesn't know where he's at, or that just drives me up a wall, or something like that, where they end the sentence in the word at. That just is not necessary. If you just take that word out completely, it still makes sense, and it sounds better, and it's actually correct. Get this, it's correct if you just say, he doesn't know where he is. That's all you need to say. And I cannot stress that enough to people. And different things like, I don't know, like the podcasters and journalists and people that are always talking, they talk about Vince McMahon and how much he loves pronouns, and saying pronouns pal, and then people say something like, it's my favorite picture of she and I, and both of those pronouns are completely incorrect, and you would want to say it's my favorite picture of me and her, because what you want to do is you take out every other pronoun. That's my foolproof way of doing it. You take out every other pronoun than the one that's in question in the sentence. So what you want to do with that, you'd say, it's my favorite picture of her. You wouldn't say, it's my favorite picture of she. And you wouldn't say, it's my favorite picture of I. You'd say, it's my favorite picture of me. So it's my favorite picture of her and me. So that's really just a foolproof way of doing it. I can't really explain all that objective stuff and subject, all that, I'm not so much a teacher, and I don't know really how to explain it all, but I just know how it works. And, like the comparative and the superlative, and people always saying something like, I don't know, like people, I can't even really come up with something right now immediately, but it's something like when you're comparing something to it, like when you say, I'm the most funny. I've heard somebody say the most funny, and it's funny, and it's funnier and funniest. He's funniest, or they are funniest, and it's not most funny or more funny. And so that's just what people do these days, and it's not only in wrestling commentary. It's everywhere. It's anybody who speaks English, and I can't get on them too much for it, because I say things incorrectly too all the time. And one thing I actually have to give credit to Michael Cole. He says something, if you ever listen to him talk about history or historical, he will say an historical event. And I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that, but that is actually correct. I used to think that was incorrect, and I would make fun of that. And then I think I made fun of it one time in front of my mother, who's a former grammar teacher, and she actually told me that was right. And I was surprised, but the way she explained it, it is a little bit confusing, because she said that it's really just an unexplainable thing. It's just because it's a silent H a lot of times, and so I think the English language and people just consensually decided to make it have an instead of a for the article in front of it, regardless of what you're using, because you say an hour too. You don't say a hour from now. You say an hour from now. And so when you say historical, it's an historical event. It's really difficult to understand and explain, and it is what it is, though, folks. So that's what I wanted to talk about as far as grammar goes in pro wrestling. You know, let's see. I got the example that I wanted to talk about was proud. Like when people are saying I'm proud or most proud or more proud of someone. No, you're prouder and you're proudest of something. That's what it should be. But that's all I got to say about that. But I'm always wrong in different things because I'm not thinking when I'm talking sometimes, and it's okay to be using good and well and interchangeable. Using good and well interchangeably. Sometimes it doesn't sound right, but everybody understands what you're saying. So that's really all that matters in the end. Just about everybody that speaks English will understand what you're saying. If you're saying I'm good or I'm well, and it really doesn't matter too much. It's just semantics, and that's what I've always loved is semantics. Like the difference between using less and fewer. That's always fun, and it's really the difference between whether or not something is tangible or not. Was it quantifiable or something like that. So it just doesn't matter. Like you have less money but fewer dollars. Because money is not really tangible. Dollars are tangible. So that's just, I know I've said that 3 or 4 times now. That's all I got to say about grammar in pro wrestling. So, Magic has always had better grammar in my opinion. And especially with the pronouns because they're always have been able to put his or her. And now I think they've switched over more recently to just putting their. And I believe they have changed the text in where they mention the card inside of itself in its own text. Like if you say Jace the Mind Sculptor, and it will say Jace the Mind Sculptor in the text 3 or 4 times. Nowadays, it would say just this card or this spell or something like that. And so I think they've really cut down on the amount of ink or the amount of text that they are trying to use, maybe because they wanted to make the cards busier and, got more things going on. Some of the gimmicks I really enjoy. Like I was talking to a friend of mine last night. We were talking about the party thing, and, that is a pretty cool thing how, it's like clerics and merfolk and something else and 3 other types of creatures or something like that. That's a really cool way of harkening back to the original ways of Magic. And, it wasn't exactly a ripoff of anything. It's actually something brand new, which is really cool. And I really, even though I'm kind of against all this whole playing from the exile zone and how different it is. It used to be when something was removed from the game, it was removed from the game and it wasn't coming back. And now, there's so many different things that can be played from exile, and you got adventure cards, and, you got the companions now, and of course, generals and EDH, and, it's so confusing, and the game has got to be so confusing for people to just pick up and learn these days. If you didn't learn back in like 2005, then I'm sorry. To me, I just feel like it has changed so much. I dropped it probably around 2004, 2005 for a little while I was in college for about probably 4 or 5 years. And I came back and Planeswalkers had just been introduced. And I was thinking, what? I thought we were the Planeswalker. Because that's how Magic was always advertised. And that's how you were told the game was played. You were 2 wizards, you were 2 Planeswalkers with 20 life, and you were using spells and creatures and instants and sorceries and enchantments and whatnot to bring down the life. And that's just what the game was. And it really changed with Planeswalkers. That was a huge hinge in the game, in how the game was played and approached, because then people started using them to soak up damage, and it just, it's another player essentially, and it's just wild. Magic really has changed a lot over the years. Let's see. One of the things I wanted to talk about was an article, and the way that the way that cards were worded. I stole this from something because people will always take advantage of the wording of cards, and so Magic has had to become so specific in the way things are, and like say, I was reading about this article here about Cadence, Trader of Get, and Flaying Tendrils, and how somehow, with Cadence, Trader of Get, if an opponent's creature was exiled, they would get a zombie token, and apparently with Flaying Tendrils, all the cards, if they die after the -2/-2 to all creatures, if a creature dies in that turn or in that way, it gets exiled. But the creature doesn't really die; it just gets exiled, so it really wouldn't get them a zombie token. But I believe somehow it said that it was really the opponent's choice, and the player that had the Cadence would the opponent would be confused, and the player would just say, yes, I do get a zombie token. So here I can say, this is the bit that I stole from the article. It says, here's the crux of the argument. Someone claiming to be a judge has posted somewhere else that they would actively seek to gain an advantage if their opponent didn't know the rules regarding the interaction between Cadence and Flaying Tendrils. For those of you unfamiliar with how those cards interact, they both create replacement effects, which cause creatures leaving the battlefield to be exiled, removed from the game. If I control a Cadence and cast Flaying Tendrils, and you control a creature that will quote-unquote die or go to the graveyard to that spell, then both replacement effects are created, and the player whose creature is dying gets to choose which replacement effect applies. It's pretty non-intuitive interaction, which a lot of players, including otherwise rule-savvy ones, just won't know. In this judge's comment, he essentially stated that if an opponent asked him, do you get the zombie token, he would simply say yes, even though his opponent actually gets the choice. Now, it's kind of similar, and I don't understand football all the way, but I do kind of understand it. It's kind of like when a team gets a penalty and the other team declines it because it helps, it would help them to actually do it the way the play ended up. Like if they get sacked or something like that for a 10-yard loss, and that's like a 5-yard penalty, and they would replay the down, the other team would just say, screw it, I'm going to decline it and, go with the 10-yard loss rather than the 5-yard loss. It's like, would you rather have your opponent have a zombie token or not? No, of course not. Duh. Unless that card's coming into play and makes them, lose life or something for some reason, and it kills them, eventually, that would be the only real reason that I could see why you would want them to get a creature. Magic, I don't know, Magic has really changed so much, because it was like in the old days with Wrath of God and Terror, you would have the difference between bury and destroy. Now that's something that was actually pretty concise, but you had to read the rule books to know the difference. Like on the old Wrath of God cards, it just said bury all creatures, and on Terror, it would say destroy target creature, target non-black, non-artifact creature, it can't be regenerated. That just, bury means that they can't be regenerated, and you had to know that. And like as a kid, I remember someone playing Wrath of God, and I had a card with regeneration on it, and I would regenerate, and they would be okay with it because we didn't know any better. It would be in the booklet, but not everybody read the whole booklet. Especially when they're teaching other people, and you're 10 years old, and shoot, nobody knows every single last rule. So it was just something that was difficult in the beginning, and I think that's changed a lot. But we also have some things like the difference between paper and online right now. Like a card, Leonin Arbiter. It's a white card, white and 1, and it's a 2/2, and I think it says something like, let's see if I have a picture of it. It's got a really funny wording on it. Yeah, here it says, players can't search libraries. Any player may pay 2 for that player to ignore this effect until end of turn. Now, online, on Magic Online, that's completely different than it is in paper, because you can like sacrifice a fetch in paper, a fetch land in paper, and you can pay the 2 as that card is as it's on the stack. The search effect is on the stack, I believe. And online, for some reason, you can't do that, and you have to pay the 2 beforehand and then go for the search effect. And it's just and it makes for the opponent to be able to have basically strip mines if they have Field of Ruin and anything that destroys lands, and lets them search for a card or for a land like a Path to Exile, just becomes even better. I mean, it's 1 mana, exile target creature just outright. So some things have really been taken advantage of by the wording of different things, and sometimes it's just the way cards are made and the way the online thing, the game is able to decipher it. It's incredibly difficult to explain, and the stack has got to be so difficult to explain to like a 10 or 12-year-old these days. Now, granted, a 10 or 12-year-old in 2020 is probably loads smarter than a 10 or 12-year-old from the mid 90s. I could be wrong, but it just seems like since they've had a screen in front of their face and they know computers backwards and forwards. I mean, they were born well after computers, were almost mastered, and I was born before that. I was born right before the internet actually started. I was born in '86, and I read recently that 1990 was the very first time that a hyperlink was created on the internet. So, technically I was born right before the internet. And, that's just what I wanted to talk about today, y'all. I want to talk about, my profile, my history of pro wrestling and Magic, and how much I enjoy the grammar and the diction, and how important it really is to people of all ages, of younger people and people these days. I'm still learning through Magic, and I learn, the way cards are worded sometimes, the names of cards explain things to me really well. I enjoy things like that. Like a signet, a signet is a real thing, and those things are really popular in the Magic Online cube because they're really good. They're meta rocks essentially, and so as far as the difference between the two, Magic the Gathering and pro wrestling, one, I feel like Magic kind of had a duty to the players to use correct grammar and the right wording, of course, so they wouldn't take advantage of the game or other players, so the game would be played properly. So they kind of had a duty to uphold that. Now, wrestling is very different. They didn't really have a civic duty to uphold in that regard, because first off, they have characters. They have wrestlers that aren't going to speak correctly, and that's actually what makes them endearing sometimes. Someone like Booker T or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or it could be anybody. A lot of those guys and like New Jack. I mean, shoot, it really doesn't matter because that adds to their aura, to their character, and to the show, really, because it makes for more variety and more variability and just more versatility, I guess you want to say, versatileness. Speaking about words that don't exist, versatileness. So again, don't get me wrong. I don't have the best grammar. I don't use the best diction. I always am second thinking things after I say them or type them or post them or whatever. I think a lot of people do. But like I say, Magic taught me a lot of words. Like I said, wretched, Leviathan, congregate. But pro wrestling taught me a few things too. Like, I didn't know the word intercontinental. And I learned a lot of good one-liners from Bobby the Brain Heenan. And we had a lot of I had a lot of great upbringing in that regard with the entertainment I was watching. I don't really watch all these reality shows, and I've never really been huge into sports. I like the sports of the teams that my dad went to college for, and of course the college I went to, Coastal Carolina, down in South Carolina, who did great this year. They just lost the last game to Liberty, and that was a heartbreaker because the referees were pretty much on their side. I know that's real kind of a tired old trope, as Cody Rhodes would like to say, but that's just what it was. The refs really didn't call a lot of things on them. But this podcast isn't about football, so whatever. I wanted to thank y'all so much for listening to this. This has been about 35 minutes. This podcast is brought to you by manatraders.com. I have a promo code. It is MOON, MOON, and you get 15% off for your first 3 months. And you can also check out my other friends, onelioncbd.com. That is ONELIONCBD.com. They are great. They have all kinds of different legal cannabis products for you to use. They can ship just about every state in America, I believe. And what I use them for, I use the salve on my feet because I have terrible neuropathy. My feet and my fingers are almost completely numb from chemotherapy from 2019. That's a whole other podcast and story. But I had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma for the short story. And what I use this for, I rub it on my feet, on the bottom of my feet, because I have incredible pain. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably a 4 or 5 all day, every day. And it's almost like a pile of fire ants crawling on my feet all the time. And, you know, if they're not in a pair of shoes or socks, really nice winter socks all the time, I feel like they can turn into icicles and I could just crack my toes right off. So if anybody else is experiencing neuropathy, check out onelioncbd.com. They have a great salve and it is well priced. And I'm working on getting a discount code for y'all on that website. And I don't know how to thank y'all. This is a lot of fun, great outlet for me. And I hope y'all enjoy. I will be back here soon. And I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, a happy holiday. And I will see y'all around the bend in the new year. Thank you.